Okay, next up, we're going to count some items in our array lists here. Or not an array list, our array. Okay, we're gonna be counting how many times something occurs. Right now, I've created a variable just called count, and I'm going to decide. Okay, as I go down this list, if I get to the right number, I want to change the count. I want my count to go up by one. So the basic idea there is that whatever my count variable is, I'm just going to do a plus plus, okay, and I want to add it every time. But I don't want to do it for every number. Let's say I only wanted to count how many times I rolled a 9, right? So what I would need to do is include an if statement in here. So if dice rolls I is equal to, so remember it's a double equal sign when I want to know if it's exactly equal to something. If it equals a 9, then I want the count to go up by 1. So then I want to do count plus plus. So with this statement here, it's going to go through every item on the list and ask, is this a 9? Is this a 9? Is this a 9? Is this a 9? Right? Because dice rolls I keeps changing, and every dice rolls that it gets to is going to be evaluating this statement. If it's true, if it is a 9, count is going to go up. So when we run this program, we should get a total of 1, 2, 3. 3 9s are rolled. So I can come down here and I can print line. Let's print the total, and we should get a result of 3. Oh, total cannot be resolved. Oh, sorry, I'm printing total instead of printing count. Total was last time. This time it's count. All right, so now I go to run it, and I get 3 as my result. So good, let's check it with a couple other numbers. I could change this now. I could check any number I wanted to. I could change and check to an 8. How many times am I rolling an 8? Oh, look, 3 8s. And just to make sure it's not always telling me 3, how many times did I roll a 7? So let's check that out. Rolled a 7 one time, and when I check the list, there is indeed 1 7 in that list of rolls. But what if we wanted to count more than just how many times we rolled a 7? What if we wanted to also count how many times we rolled an 8? Right? So we might need to give some better names for variables here. So maybe I want to call this count 7, okay? And I want to print out count 7, make sure that still works. Okay, so I'm specifically printing out how many times I counted a 7. But what if I also wanted to count 8? So then maybe I would need to make a variable called count 8. We'll start that one at 0. And just like I asked this question here, I'm going to also need to ask, is dice rolls I an 8? So I would have to check here again. And let's put it in order. Let's make it go in logical order here. So I've got 7 here. Let's check for 7 first and then check for 8. So if dice rolls I is equal to an 8, we want count 8 to go up, right? Pretty simple idea. I don't need the braces here because I've only got one statement happening with each if. And now down here at the end, I could print the 7s. I could also print line count 8 and print out how many 8s it's counting, right? So it's now, whereas before in the for loop, it was asking one question every single time. Now for every letter or for every number I in the array, so dice roll 0, it's going to ask both, are you a 7? Are you an 8? Right? It asks that question of every single item in the list. Is this a 7? No. Is this an 8? No. Okay, next item. Is this a 7? No. Is this an 8? No. Okay, next item. Is this a 7? Yes. So count 7 is going to get plus plus. And it still asks, are you an 8? Right? So it's going to ask both of those questions for every single number on the list. That count only gets updated if that statement is true. So when I go through and do this now, I get 1 7 and I get 1 3. Now, if I wanted to do that for every single number, it would get kind of tedious, right? I would have to start doing something like this. I would need int count 6, get 0. And I would need to go all the way down to 2s, right? Because I can get 2. So int count 5. And that is 0. And I would just basically want to copy and paste these a bunch of times. Boom, Control C, Control V, Control V. That should be a 3. That should be a 4. Whew, and that's going to be a lot of copying and pasting. And then I have to do the same thing down here. I'd have to copy and paste all of these if statements, ask that question, and then every number in the list, however many if statements I put inside of my for loop, it's going to ask that question of every single number in the list, right? So we're going to be asking for every single number, are you a 5? Are you a 2? Are you a 3? Are you a 4? Are you a 5? Are you a 6? Oh, it's a 5, right? So I went up 1 on the 5. And it's still going to ask, are you a 6? Are you a 7? Are you an 8? And it gets really, really, really tedious. Okay. So just like when we had that list of variables that we were making and we wanted to make an array, here's another example of making a list of variables, and this should probably be an array instead. So let's get rid of all of these, and we'll talk about this part later. And let's instead make an array to hold our count results, right? So I'm going to do int count, and instead of putting numbers in it, I'm going to say new to make an empty array. And it's going to hold integers, and I need to tell it how many spots to put in there. I want to go up to the index number 12 because just from a logical standpoint in writing this program, I want the index number to match the actual number of the total on the roll. So I'm going to say make me 13 spots, even though I'm not going to use all of them. Okay. So here's my new array to hold the counts of each item in the list. Now, all I should need to change at this point is saying, okay, if dice rolls I is a 7, well, I want count 7 to go up. And I want count 8 to go up if it's an 8. And I would do the same thing. I would keep going, count 9, count 10. But that's a pattern. If we copy and paste this over and over again, that's a sign that we should be using a loop. And so let me go back here and just kind of copy and paste this a bunch so we can see this a little bit more clearly. See what we're doing here. I'm going to have a bunch of if statements. Okay. And the idea is that I would start these if statements by asking, are you a 2? Okay, if you are a 2, let's make count 2 go up. We're not worried about count 0 and count 1 because I can never roll a 0 and I can never roll a 1. Okay. Now, are you a 3? If you're a 3, make count 3 go up. Are you a 4? Okay, make count 4 go up. Are you a 5? Okay, make count 5 go up. And we have that same idea that we had before of we have this number increasing, and that's when we took the variable I and we did something with it. Now we can't use I right now because I has a very special job. I is stepping through the dice rolls array. But now I need a new variable that's going to allow me to step through the count array. It's going to start at 2, and then it's going to go 3, and then 4, and then 5, and go change the count of 5, and then go to 6 and change the count of 6. And I want that pattern to happen in another loop. So I'm going to put a loop inside of a loop. So for int, I can't call it I because I is already existing right now. I is already in use. So I'm going to call this one J. J, I want to start asking the questions at 2. Okay, and then as long as J is less than or equal to 12, because I do want it to ask the question about 12s. And then I want J to go up every time. So rather than having to type out all those questions, I can come back here and let's get rid of these lines too. We're going to need to change those. Actually, we'll leave them for now and I'll change them after I'm done. So I'm going to make J go up by 1 every time. And now instead of asking, is dice rolls I equal to 2? I'm going to say, is dice rolls I equal to J? And if it is, I want the count of J to go up by 1. And there we go. There's our loop. Now I can count every single number in the list with just 2 little simple lines right there. Okay. If I wanted to print out my totals, I just simply need to add my brackets around these variable names that I made earlier. And now I can print out, I should get the same results that I got before, a 1 and a 3. Boom. And I could change these to any numbers that I want. 3, and let's try 5s. So let's print 5s and 3s, a 2 and a 1. There we go. Another handy feature about arrays is that it's really easy to print out the entire array. So I can do something like print array and print the array count. And let's watch what happens. Boom, I get a nicely formatted list that shows me both my index number and my value for that number. So notice we did not roll any 0s, of course. There's 2 dice. We did not roll any 1s. There were no 2s rolled because 2s are pretty rare. Then we rolled 1 3, 1 4, 2 5s, 1 6, 1 7, 3 8s, 3 9s, 1 10, 1 11, and no 12s. Right? So we did all of that with a really simple set of loops. We had one loop that steps through the dice rolls array and looks at each number in that list. Then we have a second loop that's asking the question, is this number equal to 2? Is it equal to 3? Is it equal to 4? And when that was true, we made that number go up by 1. Now, there's one last way to do this here. We can make this program even simpler, okay? Because if you really step back to think about the logic, we're counting something every time, right? Every single time we look at one of these items in the list, we definitely want a count to go up. So I don't even really need a decision here. I can do this without the if statement. I want the count to go up every single time. So let's just think about this. Count plus plus, okay? Which count do I want to go up? Well, when I look at a 5, I want the 5 to appear here. I want it to be a 5. And when I look at the 10, I want a 10 to appear there. And when I look at the 7, I want a 7 to appear there. So to get those numbers, those values to appear, if you remember back to what we talked about with this idea of substitution, then all we have to do is type dice rolls I. So now, when the computer goes through this loop, the first time through, it's going to say dice rolls I. Well, that's a 0 right now. Hey, what is dice roll 0? So we substituted the I. Now the computer is going to reevaluate it and substitute again. Dice roll 0 was a 5. So now it becomes a 5. Now we add 1 to 5. Then we go back. We've ended the loop, so now I becomes a 1. And the computer says, okay, dice rolls 1. What is dice rolls 1? Dice rolls 1 is a 10. So now we have count 10 goes up by 1. And we keep doing that all the way through the list. And we've done that entire idea of counting how many times something has appeared in the list with just one for loop and one simple line of code. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.